So first of all, I want to ask you, I mean, obviously this is a very weird format to do stand-up comedy in. Typically you hear audible laughter or a lack of it, which would tell you something in an in-person venue too. You can't do any crowd work. There's people are not necessarily drinking. How weird is it for you to put on a stand-up show over Zoom?
It is getting more normal, I would say. It is weird, but obviously, you know, I have a split camera, like my computer is separate from my camera. So when I look down every so often, I can see a few laughs from people, and that keeps me going. You just adjust. It's, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. So my first Zoom show, I was surprised at how well it went, but you sort of learn very quickly, because saying random things to people, to strangers, is already an odd sort of thing, if you think about it. So you adapt very quickly to your surroundings. So Zoom is just another format that requires adaptation. But for me, I think it also helps, you know, like I said, I'm 17 years in stand-up. That doesn't make me necessarily great or good, but I am experienced, and I have enough faith in 95% of what I say, so that, you know, I go, well, a lot of these jokes are new, obviously based on COVID. So I haven't performed them in traditional settings yet, but I can trust my own instincts and my own experience. So, you know, a little bit like, you know, I don't want to say anything to diminish someone's struggles, but like, you know, the way I would imagine somebody who's blind, who quickly figures out how to feel their way around something, like they're a little more attuned to feeling things out than maybe somebody would otherwise be if you just close their eyes and they've never been vision impaired. I think that's like being a comedian with Zoom. It's like, I've been to enough bad shows, I've done enough rough shows, and I've been good long enough that you just sort of say, I'm pretty sure this is working, even if I'm not getting the same exact cues.
Yeah, and you know, in what we do presentation training, and a lot of people, same thing, are used to speaking in front of an audience, and now all of a sudden they are speaking into a cold camera that doesn't give any feedback. In some cases, the camera's off, and you're just kind of having to depend on muscle memory. And so it's exactly what you said. I am curious, you brought up the adjustments you had to make early on. I'm curious, what were the adjustments you had to make? Because what I'm curious about is, in terms of how you develop rapport with an audience, I would imagine it would be very different when you're doing that with a live audience in front of you than it would be when you're trying to develop a rapport with muted screens.
Sure. I think I was lucky in my very first Zoom show that I agreed to do, because I was skeptical. I was just like, I'm waiting for the clubs. I don't do computer shows. I'm a real comedian. But the first show I did, I think, it was sort of a sports league kind of thing. And I think the vibe of the audience was like people who went to stand-up comedy shows. So I feel like I got a good entry into Zoom comedy by doing a few shows for people who weren't, no offense to this group, but my first few were people who were kind of craving stand-up comedy, not people looking for just random entertainment, you know. And then it got to the point where I was doing like shows for families, and you know, those I sort of knew I needed more information. Like you, for instance, this is the second show I've done today. The first one was a straight up corporate lunch, sort of do 20 minutes of humor for our gathering. Well, I needed information on those people, because I said, this setting is going to be the setting is not a group of people who want a comedy show. Or in this case, you said, please do your stand-up. We want to analyze you like a lab rat, because we do presentations. So we want to examine you in the wild. No, but for like a corporate show, I want as much detail about the business as possible, because you're in a corporate setting. You're in a rigid environment that's sort of framed by your work. So the more I talk about what's in your wheelhouse, I'm funny, I can take that information and make it funny. But if I did this set for this afternoon's show, it might make a few of them laugh, but for a lot of other people, the setting might not feel right. Whereas tonight, people seem to enjoy it, but you made it kind of clear, like he's going to do his stand-up set and then we'll ask questions. So it's about, I think, expectations and figuring out what the people who are requesting you want. I don't even know if that really answered the question. I think I gave you like a different answer than.
No, it is a good answer. And I'm curious. I mean, first of all, I'm guessing that if in February somebody had come to you and said, hey, we want you to do stand-up comedy online, you would have kind of looked at them and thought they were crazy. And my guess is decline the opportunity. And so now my question is, now that you've done this post-pandemic, when people are able to get back into comedy clubs again, will you continue doing things like this? Did you discover that this is another medium that you could make work?
I think I can make it work. My preference would be only when necessary would I want to do this. Like I don't think I'd turn it down. I don't think I'd say it wouldn't be a matter of I don't do this. It would be like, well, I have 4 shows over the week at clubs. I'll see if I can make it work if that's what you prefer. But my strong preference is to be in a club or live. If it's a corporate event, is still to be live, because as I was telling my girlfriend today, doing mediocre in front of like a corporate crowd or a charity event, which I have done, is somehow not as awkward as feeling like you're doing poorly on a computer. I don't know why that is. Like, in other words, you'd think, oh my God, half the people in this room feel very uncomfortable with me right now. And yet it still feels more normal, I guess, than a bunch of people staring at you blankly. And you're like, I think I'm doing well. Because you have this like double uncertainty, I feel like, on the, doing it virtually like this. Not you guys, though. I will say, a lot of good expressive laughers. So whether they were faking it or meant it, it felt good to me. So thank you.
Yeah. Everything that you're saying, I mean, I think evolutionarily we understand how to interact with other humans in person, and interacting with them over a screen is not something we've caught up to yet. At some point, maybe we will. So maybe your, great grandchildren, or even many generations after this will be the normal thing. But I'm not sure we've caught up yet. We have maybe 5 minutes or so left. I'm a bit of a comedy geek, and I would love to ask you just a couple of comedy questions.
The time limit is on your end, just to let you know. Like for me, you're not on any.
Thank you.
At 45. So
then in that case, we might take advantage of a few additional questions to President Trump. I'm sure people would love to hear what he has to say. But a couple of comedy geek questions for you. The first one, I think one of the things that really impresses me about you, I love impressionists, and in addition to stand-up. And I think there's a lot of different types of impressions. You have people like Chevy Chase, who got famous doing a very broad version of Gerald Ford, wasn't going after his voice or his mannerisms. I think Alec Baldwin's Trump kind of falls into that category, at least it does for me. You have people like Rich Little, who I think just nailed a voice, but was very kind of literal, I think, in his interpretation of how he took that person on. And then I think there's people like you, who almost seems like not only are they getting the mannerisms right and the voice right, but they're kind of getting into the guts of who the person really is. And I think that's kind of a rare quality. So I don't even know what the question is there, other than to ask maybe what you think about or how you think about impressions in general.
Sure. No, that was very much like an OAN question for Trump, where it's just like, sir, you're a very great man. What do you think about that? No, I would say one of the things early in my comedy career, I think there's certain, like, I didn't get into comedy because I thought I would be a good stand-up comedian. I needed a hobby. I was a little depressed in law school, and it was literally just like a hobby that I thought, I'm funny to my friends. Maybe this would be something that I would be good at. I had no idea. I had no expectations. I figured if I stunk the first time out, I would probably have quit. But I was good enough at my first open mic that I felt encouraged. But a few years later, like for about 2 years, my first 2 years, much like George Carlin, not to make the comparison, but this is his story too. He started out as an impersonator. He was doing a lot of impressions on stage, and I was doing the same because it was a little bit of a crutch. You know, you can sort of figure out funny scenarios, but the heavy lifting of the humor is done with the voice. When people see somebody who's not that person doing the voice, it's fun. If it's not funny, it's at least fun. And I did a comedy contest, and it must have been 2005 or 2006. So 2, maybe 3 years into my comedy career. At that point, it wasn't a career, into my comedy hobby. And I finished second, and I knew I'd had a really good set. And one of the hosts of the show, I said, why did I finish second? And they said, well, you did impressions, and those were really funny, and people liked it, but we just don't think that's real stand-up. And part of me agrees, but part of me, and I think I took that lesson, and from around 2008, I split my stand-up comedy, the way Netflix split streaming and discs. Stand-up comedy was going to be all I did on stage. It was going to be my voice. It was going to be my thoughts, my stories. But impressions I've been doing since I was a kid. I want to keep doing those. I'm going to focus on making sketches and YouTube. Turn YouTube into my own Saturday Night Live, and turn my stand-up stage into my own Tonight Show performances. And I think developing those skills totally separately helped kind of enhance both. Because now when I did impressions, I didn't waste any of my time on stage figuring out goofy scenarios to go, those are lazy. And I say that as somebody who did them. And I'm not saying they can't be fun, but what if Donald Trump was your barista at Starbucks? It's lazy. And I didn't do any of that laziness. Everything I said on stage was an increasingly developed and honed sense of humor and timing and skill. And then I would go over to YouTube, or as it turns out, Twitter this year, and make sketches where the impressions didn't have to be explained. You had to bolster the impression now with better writing and better scenarios, because it wasn't just the gimmick that I was doing on stage. It was, you need to now make this Trump impression, this Obama impression, this Owen Wilson impression, whoever. It has to have more to it in this space. And over here, you can't hide behind anything in stand-up, because the point is, I think my impressions, as good or whatever as they are in terms of what I bring to the table, is that they're bringing well-honed verbal and observations, but with a much sharper, developed humor behind them. And so it's like a combo, I guess, peanut butter and jelly, I guess.
Well, at the risk of being a cultish OAN host, I'll say I think it's a real gift, and you are unusual in your ability to marry both the mannerisms and the voice, and really understanding the spirit and motivations of the person you're imitating. And so maybe with that, I could ask you, and before I ask a few of the different people who are there with you in your head, just their views on a couple of things. Could I just ask you, is there one impression that's under the radar that you're particularly proud of, that you wish you could do more?
That's a good question. Honestly, obviously, if you've checked out my work, I have, like, people really like different ones. Like Joel Osteen is one that I did a few years ago that always gets traffic when I share it online. But the one I was really happy with, that I think has a future if this actor keeps moving up, is an actor, John Bernthal. He played Shane on The Walking Dead. He played the Punisher on Netflix Marvel series. You'd recognize his face. He's been in a lot of movies, drama and action, and he was in The Wolf of Wall Street. And he's like on the cusp, I feel. And I did a whole at-home series with him, like just what the Punisher does at home. It's very stupid, but it's a really good impression. And I think to myself, if he gets a little bit bigger, that would be the kind of thing that I would probably use as part of a sketch show audition. Not to go with one that's known, but not super known.
So maybe I could just ask the first question to John Bernthal, whose work I'm not very familiar with. And
no, then I can't. I'm going to cut you off, because then I really will be just a dude grunting in my apartment to silence.
Right. Well, maybe your dog would enjoy it. Who knows?
Can I tell you the one funny thing that happened, because I've been doing these cameo messages. It's been very lucrative for me, but these are basically D-list celebrities do messages for people. But for me, it's been perfect because the messages are all cell phone videos. And that's how I basically became known. So it fits my format that I'm known for. But somebody who I went to college with asked me for one for his group of friends. And he said, "We love your impressions, dude. And we went to high school with John Bernthal. That guy sucks. Can you do a cameo for us as John Bernthal?" So I just did John Bernthal basically bullying them for 3 minutes. That was like, in other words, it's always nice when somebody recognizes something beyond the one thing that you're really well known for. So
absolutely. So with that, maybe I could just ask a question of Governor Cuomo. I am curious because, in some corners you're a sex symbol. And in other corners, other people said, look, you waited too long to close down. And as a result, there was a lot more death than needed to be the case. What would you say to your critics?
Look, I did more than anybody here. Nursing homes are like, the sauce when you're making a meal. You have to take your time, but there's a recipe. And here's the thing, whenever I can't hook it with L's, like the Cuomo is one of those ones that I'm so limited with. Now I'm having to reveal every secret.
I'm glad that well, that's fine, because I was actually, your Mitch McConnell couldn't be more appropriate. Finally, after 2 months or so of him, or I guess 5 or 6 weeks of him refusing to accept the results of the election, the majority leader finally came out and said that he acknowledges that it is indeed President-elect Biden. So, Senator McConnell, I'm curious, what made you decide to finally start calling him the President-elect?
Well, as somebody who respects the Constitution, we have a process. We have a process in this country. It's called the Electoral College. And then when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris got the necessary vote from the Electoral College, it was simple. I acknowledged it. I congratulated them. And I told President Trump to shut up. And it was that simple.
Thank you very much, Mr. Majority Leader. I
feel like I have to defend myself. Some of these impressions, I think maybe the reason some of them you like, and half of them come easily. And then half of them, when I had to do the Dave Chappelle video I put out a couple of weeks ago, my girlfriend was yelling at me by the time we were ready to do that, because I spent the whole week trying to talk like Dave Chappelle, because I was like, I know it's there. And she was so annoyed with it. And I understand, because, I was doing the sort of serious Dave Chappelle. There's Dave Chappelle that's on, I feel like I need a cigarette in my hand, because Dave Chappelle has become very serious. He's not the young Chappelle who's walking around going, I'm rich, bitch. It's more of I'm Dave Chappelle. I'm a thinker. I am a philosopher on stage, and now my rhythm is different to the way I speak. And I kept talking to my girlfriend like that for a week, and she was just like, stop. And I was like, but for me, it was like, all I have to do is get this good for the 6-minute video a week from now. And then so the Cuomo is more one of those ones that I will be in my room for an hour going, we are not doing this. Ventilators, parallel parking is something that we need to do. And so when you put me on the spot for some of them, I'm like, oh, I haven't done my, I sound like an opera singer. Oh, I need to do my verbal exercises.
Right.
It's very pretentious.
At the risk, well, first of all, for your girlfriend, I think you could tell her that the Chappelle will probably get a PlayStation 5 out of the deal. So,
right.
Maybe just two more to close with. I think I love your Vice President Pence, because I think you get at his, that sycophantic, it just feels like I mentioned before, capturing the spirit of the person. So would it be, he's entered the chat. Vice President Pence, do you have any final words for President Trump. He's obviously dispirited that he lost his reelection bid. Any words of encouragement you might offer him?
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the legal process pan out, because under the great leadership of our president, Donald J. Trump, we have seen prosperity like this country's never seen. So I want to give our president every chance he can on his big, strong, masculine shoulders to see this process out. So, but what I do think is, I think that we owe a debt of gratitude to this great, bold, and courageous leader, Donald J. Trump, because without him, I think we would have had many more deaths and a lot less economic prosperity. So I am proud to have served with this president, and I will tell him that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. And I'm hoping that we could get just one word in with the president. Mr. President, I do want to ask you, it seems like you finally are acknowledging your loss. What will you do? What do you, I see that my supposition is incorrect. Nonetheless, on January 20th, 2021 at noon, what are your plans? What do you see for yourself over the next couple of years?
Well, okay, for the first plan, January, what was the date? I don't even remember what the date was.
January 20th,
Yeah,
2020.
not a significant date to me.
Okay.
But what I'm thinking I'll do is one of two things. We're either going to have a very strong rally in my new state of Florida right at the same time, okay? Probably in Tampa, near some of the gentlemen's clubs they have down there, make it a sort of very classy affair. And, we'll give a speech there where I'll announce very strongly, by the way, that I'm running in 2024. The other option, which we're weighing very seriously and strongly, is I show up mid Sleepy Joe Biden inaugural speech, because it's going to be one of the worst speeches you've ever heard. And I'm going to show up, and you may not know this, but I am a WWE Hall of Famer. They put me in the Wrestling Hall of Fame for my great contributions. Mid Sleepy Joe's speech, I'm going to take a steel chair and I'm going to run up behind them, and they're going to play my theme music, Lee Greenwood's God Bless America. And I'm going to hit him in the back of the chair, in the back with the chair. And I'm going to declare that we are going to fight on the White House lawn, wrestling style, for the presidency. And then I'm going to serve my wife malaria with divorce papers.
Well, JL, you have been an enormous sport. Thank you for your talent